Welcome to the latest edition of the Hub of Champions with your host, Shukri Rice, the first episode of 2024. Happy New Year to you, wherever you may be, however you may be listening to the podcast, wherever you get your podcast, watching on YouTube. I appreciate you, the listener and the audience who takes the time out to watch and listen to the pod talking all things Boston sports. I am fired up for this episode because to begin 2024, I already have an entire full course menu of topics to divulge into and to discuss. And why waste time? Why waste time with the small chatter? Like why does that have to be part of the discussion? As a matter of fact, what we're going to talk about right away, we're going to talk about the Red Sox because literally just going into the new year, there was some big news surrounding the Boston Red Sox in which that it's only befitting, after all, that we take the time to talk about. The Red Sox signing Lucas Giolito to a 2-year deal, which is really a 1-year deal with a player option for the second year. That's the first one. But I think the bigger one is the second news I broke was the trade of Chris Sale to the Atlanta Braves after Sale agreed to waive his no trade clause to be traded to a National League contender in the Atlanta Braves. Because for a lot of different reasons, Chris Sale over the last few seasons has been a legitimate topic among Boston Red Sox fans, Boston sports media, in which that this was a guy that was signed to that big contract at after the 2018 season, prior to the start of the 2019 season. And unfortunately, Chris Sale, after that 2018 World Series championship, in which that he recorded the final 3 outs of that World Series, Chris Sale pretty much had been a ghost. He had been unavailable. You know, the old saying goes in sports that availability is the best ability. That is true. Unfortunately, Chris Sale was not available more times than not. In the final, you could say the final 5 seasons that he was a Red Sox, from 2019 up until 2023, he was not available more times than not. You want to know how unavailable he was? Chris Sale only appeared in 56 games combined over the last 5 seasons because of Tommy John, a fractured rib, a broken finger, and a broken wrist that he sustained when he supposedly fell off a bicycle. Remember that? Yeah. Pepper Ridge Farm remembers. So many people have asked this question, and Red Sox fans have had this discussion on social media. What will the legacy of Chris Sale be? And my answer is very simple. There's always going to be a level of sentimentalism that is going to be applied here with Chris Sale, because Chris Sale was the starting pitcher turned reliever in the 2018 World Series in game 5, in which that he recorded the final 3 outs, and that's what Red Sox fans are going to remember him for primarily. Meanwhile, I'm going to remember him primarily as the guy over the last 5 seasons only appeared in 56 games for the Boston Red Sox. And during that stretch, the Red Sox only made the postseason once. That was 2021, and that was in spite of Chris Sale. That was in spite of Chris Sale's availability. So when the news broke on over the weekend, in which that Chris Sale was being traded to the Atlanta Braves, I thought immediately that, wow, this could be a low risk, high reward type of deal for the Atlanta Braves, in which that we know that the Braves, they are absolutely stacked in terms of pitching. We obviously know about Spencer Strider, and the fact that he is pretty much the ace of the staff right now. Like, we also know about like some of the other young starters for the Atlanta Braves that they have as well. But the truth is, Chris Sale, because of his injury history over the last 5 seasons, this is someone in which that the Red Sox, they know his medical history. They said, hey, you know what? Not only that we're going to trade him, but we're basically going to pay about $17 million off of his contract, just to lighten the load for the Atlanta Braves financially. So I have to say that if you're looking at Chris Sale in terms of what his legacy will be, unfortunately, I don't think he totally deserves his legacy to be remembered as the guy who got the final 3 outs of the 2018 World Series to close out that magical 2018 season, the greatest Red Sox team of all time. I think he should be remembered as someone who was not dependable, not reliable. I think that Chris Sale should be remembered as someone, after getting paid, after getting that contract extension prior to the 2019 season, that this guy was only available for 56 games over the course of the last 5 seasons that he was a Red Sox. And last season, despite that he appeared in, he made 20 starts. Congratulations. That was more than what most people would have expected. But let's be real. He came back with diminished velocity. And oh, by the way, he was limited to a pitch count of 80 to 85 pitches in most of his starts. So reliability, durability, non-existent over the last 5 seasons. And that's what I'm ultimately going to remember about Chris Sale, because when you're paid the big bucks, when you're paid top dollar to be the ace, you're expected to show up every five days and make your start and perform at a high level. Chris Sale, because of the myriad of injuries that we talked about, was not available. And when he was available last season, 20 starts that he made, he was on a pitch count to basically preserve him. Not good. Not good at all. So Chris Sale is going to be remembered as, yeah, he was the guy that saved the 2018 World Series, clinched the 2018 World Series for the Red Sox. He was the guy that, yeah, he was also dominant during that 2018 season, before the injuries and so forth. But what he ultimately should be remembered for is his body breaking down after he got the big contract prior to the 2019 season by the Boston Red Sox. And that was a Dave Dombrowski move that was made out of fear, because the Red Sox brass didn't want to make the same mistake that they made with John Lester back in 2014. That's exactly what that was. Knowing full well that there was going to be inherent risk of giving Sale, who hadn't up until that point made 30 to 32 starts in a season, that there was going to be massive risk involved giving him that kind of money. Excluding 2018, you're looking at 2019 through 2023, failure. The contract was a failure. Bringing him back was seemingly the right decision. But in the end, the Red Sox didn't get a whole lot out of him. And when they did get something out of him, they were left having to scramble, having to wonder how are they going to replace his innings in the rotation. And that's a bad place to be, especially if you're a team that needs innings out of its starters. Speaking of innings out of your starters, that's precisely the reason why the Red Sox went out and got Lucas Giolito. Because the reality is that Lucas Giolito, say what you will about his performance in 2023, lackluster, yeah. Did he struggle between his time between the Angels and as well as the Cleveland Guardians? Yeah. But the reality is that he wasn't himself. He wasn't himself. He was someone in which that, despite being a guy who can give you innings and was that guy for the Chicago White Sox between 2018 and 2021, by and large part, this was someone that is known to give you innings and to give you quality starts. He was actually one of the better starter pitchers in the American League during that stretch. But the final 2 years, 2022, 2023, he was really a shell of himself, of the all-star pitcher that he was from 2018 to 2021, in which that he was an all-star. So the Red Sox bring him in. They need someone that can give them big innings. They can give him at least maybe 180, 185, if not more. Only time will tell whether if he will be able to deliver, because the Red Sox in 2023, they are going to need their starters to go deep into games. They're going to be asking a lot more out of Brian Bayo. They're going to be asking a lot more out of Tanner Howick. They're going to be asking a lot more out of Nick Pivetta. They're going to be asking more out of out of like Tanner Howick, as I mentioned, and as well as like the other starters. So the reality is, the Red Sox, they need guys that can eat up innings, and that's the first big move of the offseason for chief baseball operator Craig Breslow. Congratulations, you made a big move. But you have a right to also wonder, is this the first move that is going to be a prelude of what is potentially to come for the Boston Red Sox? Only time will tell. Only time will tell. But that's just the first major move of the offseason for the Boston Red Sox. Will there be more? Only time will tell. Coming up next, the first and probably the biggest decision that Robert Kraft is going to have to make under his ownership. I think you and I know what this is, but in case if you don't, stick around. Don't go anywhere. You're listening and watching the Hub of Champions with the host Shook Rights on Believe Network. Welcome back to the Hub of Champions podcast with your host, Shukri Wright, here on the Believe Network. Thank you for those that are listening to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and as well as those of you that are watching this on YouTube as well. Hope you are enjoying the podcast so far in this first episode of 2024. Happy New Year to you and your loved ones. Hope it is a happy, healthy New Year for all of you. So, in continuation of this episode, we're now done with week 17 of the NFL season. There's only 1 week remaining in the regular season. Only one. Week 18. And then after that, if your team is lucky enough to qualify for the NFL playoffs, you play in the NFL playoffs, a wild card round. That's, of course, if your team hasn't clinched a first round bye, which that's already pretty much sealed up by both the Baltimore Ravens and as well as San Francisco 49ers. With that being said, I will also take it a step further and say that if, and I mean if, you're one of the teams who did not make the playoffs, i.e. the New England Patriots, you have one more regular season game left on your schedule before the season mercifully comes to an end. Because let's call it for what it is. When the regular season comes to an end, now the loud noises that you are already hearing will become even more amplified. Patriot fans who wanted answers and accountability during the regular season, this may be the chance where there may be some level of accountability taking place this offseason by Robert Kraft as it pertains to Bill Belichick. There's only one way to find out. We're all going to have to grab a popcorn, pull up a chair, come on into the barbecue, and watch the movie and the drama unfold. So that directly leads me to this point. It leads me to the point of Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft. They are going to be meeting and coming to a head once the regular season concludes in about weeks' time. Robert Kraft is going to have to make arguably the most important decision of his ownership tenure so far as the owner of the New England Patriots, as he's been the owner of the Patriots since 1994. And that is, what do you do with Bill Belichick? Ladies and gentlemen, you and I have seen or listened to every Patriots game in 2023, including week 18, which is in 2024. You have seen the absolute garbage of a product that the Patriots have put on the field, but primarily, especially on the offensive side of the football, regardless of whether if it was Mac Jones under center, whether if it was Bailey Zappi under center, and so forth. Didn't matter who was under center at all. It didn't matter. The fact of the matter is that offensively, we all know how bad they are. We all know that they are among the bottom 5 in the NFL in terms of the overall offense. We know that. No need to split hairs and talk about the stats. And a lot has to do with the man who has been the head coach and the general manager of the New England Patriots since 2000, Bill Belichick. Robert Kraft is going to have to ask some really tough questions, make some really tough decisions. And to the eyes of the fans, it's a lot of fans are like, well, it should be easy. He should be gone. But something tells me that Robert Kraft is going to be deliberate in his decision making, and he should be. And you've heard me say on this very pod and on social media say that Bill Belichick should be gone, that he should be fired after the regular season ends. I just have this hunch that Robert Kraft is going to take his time in making this decision. Why do I think this way? Because if there's one thing about Robert Kraft that we have seen is that he doesn't make decisions out of sheer emotion, but he isn't afraid to take action. Look no further than the offseason of 2021, when he basically opened the wallet and the checkbook and spent big money on free agents like Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, and others. We've seen Robert Kraft make swift decisions in terms of opening the checkbook, go out and spend the money. But he hasn't had to make a decision over the course of the last 24 years in regards to its head coach and GM. Now Robert Kraft is going to have to make that decision. And yes, you already know where I stand. Bill Belichick should be gone, but Robert Kraft is going to say, I'm going to look at the big picture here. Do I still think that Bill Belichick can coach? Yes. Do I still think that Bill Belichick should still be the general manager? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He should not be the general manager of this team or anywhere else. And I will tell you this. I will tell you that if Robert Kraft is thinking in terms of the financial ramifications of Bill Belichick, of him staying with the New England Patriots, he should take into consideration that there will be a lot of very unhappy Patriot fans who will not be particularly thrilled if Belichick is still the head coach. Let's just call it for what it is. A lot of people will not be thrilled if Belichick still remains as general manager of the team, because roster construction, the development of the quarterback of Mac Jones, all of it has gone south under his control. All of which that has happened with Mac Jones's regression is at the hands of Bill Belichick, and it all goes back to him. There's no denying that. Who was responsible for the regression of Mac Jones in 2022? Bill Belichick was. Who was responsible for not giving Mac Jones the necessary tools that he needs to succeed in 2023? Bill Belichick. That does not mean that Bill Belichick should remain as general manager. Well, if he goes out and he gets him the proper tools, like better protection from the offensive line and a number one receiver, things will be fine. No, you still need a franchise quarterback because in case if you haven't realized by now, or as of yet, Mac Jones isn't it. Bailey Zappi sure as hell isn't it, especially after that last game against the Buffalo Bills where he threw 3 interceptions. So the harsh truth and the harsh reality is this. Bill Belichick as GM should not remain. And if you're Robert Kraft and you care about the product of the New England Patriots, if you care about the brand of the New England Patriots, you have to move on from Bill Belichick entirely. And the reason is as follows is because the brand has taken a massive hit in the last 2 years, but none more so than this season. You had one of your games flexed out of a primetime spot on Monday Night Football, something that has never happened in the history of the NFL. Why? Because the Patriots stink. And if Robert Kraft is truly serious about beginning the process of restoring the Patriots brand back to prominence, he has got to move on and he's got to make the decision, the right decision to move off of Bill Belichick, both the GM and the head coach. That is where we have gotten to at this moment in time at the beginning of 2024. So the most important decision that Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft are going to have to make, they're going to have to make right after the regular season finale. They're going to have to look each other across each other from the table and say, you know what? Change is needed. But if Bill Belichick's pride and says, I don't want to leave, then Robert Kraft has to make sure that his balls are still there and make the gutsy decision to move on from Belichick. Because it's no longer just about pride at this point. It's about returning this team back to contention, something that this team has not been doing a whole lot of since Brady's departure after the 2019 season. And that's where we are now. Robert Kraft is going to have to make the biggest decision of his ownership tenure. And will it be easy? On his part, maybe not. But from an outsider's point of view looking in, it should be a pretty simple one. Because I'm sure Robert Kraft is a businessman. And businessmen have to make cold, calculated decisions. And sometimes the unpopular one at that. Coming up next, I want to talk about the Bruins briefly. And as well as, share some thoughts on the Celtics as well. So don't go anywhere. You're listening and watching the Hub of Champions podcast with your host, Shukri Wrights, on Believe Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to the Hub of Champions podcast with your host, Shukri Wrights. Glad to be able to do in this first episode of the new year. Happy New Year to all of you that are listening or watching the pod. So in this final segment of this first episode of the new year for the Hub of Champions podcast on Believe Network, I figured I would spend some time talking about the Bruins and as well as, do a little Celtics minute and so forth. And as far as the Bruins are concerned, I think it's really fascinating to sit here and watch how different and how energized the Bruins have looked, especially coming out of their Christmas break. And for me, there's a player or two that has really begun to rise to the occasion. You're seeing Jake DeBrusk begin and have begun to get hot offensively, scoring back-to-back games. And another player that I think that deserves to be talked about and deserves to have a discussion about is Trent Frederick, because I think it's really interesting how Trent Frederick has really, in the last few games, he's begun to pick up his pace and his offensive production, which really could bode really well for the Boston Bruins. And I think that for a player like Trent Frederick, who's now 25 years old and he's a regular in this Bruins lineup and has been over the last 4 seasons, I think that Frederick stepping up offensively could be huge for the bottom six, in which that I've voiced my concerns about the lack of offensive production from the bottom six at times for the Bruins. And Trent Frederick, especially if he's able to continue to maintain the level that he's been playing at, not just in terms of the offensive production, but in terms of his physicality and his presence in this lineup, this could serve the Boston Bruins very well. Frederick, he's got 9 goals and 18 points this season so far. I mean, there is a chance that he could crack 40 points this season for the first time in his career, which is improvement offensively. But I think also that it's important to make note that he's starting to gain confidence with the puck as well, and you're seeing it. And for me, I thought it really showed itself in the game against the Red Wings on New Year's Eve. And I think that is something that is very much important to keep in mind and to always remember, because Trent Frederick, when he's going and he's confident in himself with the puck, he's showing you that he has ability to make an impact, to be a force. And this is someone who, by the way, who's 6'3" and 220 pounds. So this is no small kid at all. This is a player with size. And I've always been a big Trent Frederick fan. And you know what's interesting? Ever since Lucic was lost due to the domestic violence situation indefinitely, I've always wondered, where is the physicality going to come from? Where is the production that you might have gotten from Lucic instead was going to come from? And it looks like Frederick may be the guy that to be able to supply both a little bit of offense. Maybe he scores 40 points this season, but he could also be a physical presence, because there have been moments and times in which that I felt that the Bruins were getting pushed around a little too far much for my liking. And you need someone to be able to step up, especially when other teams started taking liberties at you. And you look at the other night between the Bruins and the Red Wings, and this was a prime example of that. Trent Frederick standing up for Morgan Geekie after Ben Sherratt, the Red Wings defenseman, he drilled him with a couple of right hand shots, and you saw Frederick, say, "Hey, let's go. Want to dance? Let's dance." And basically, Ben Sherratt twice did not answer the invitation by Trent Frederick to fight, to basically answer for what he did to Morgan Geekie. That's a prime example of what I mean in terms of the physical presence, and as well as answering the bell and sticking up for your teammates. And I think that in itself is going to be critical moving forward for the Bruins and for Trent Frederick to continue to elevate his game offensively, and as well as continue. He's obviously been like the physical presence that this team has needed and has been lacking since the indefinite leave of Milan Lucic. But Frederick, man, I really like what I've seen in terms of him stepping up in the last few games, but especially like his presence physically as well. Um Also, in terms of the Bruins, there is one area of concern that I do have. We knew going into the season that the Bruins were going to miss Patrice Bergeron dearly. That goes without saying. We knew that. But how much? Hmm. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be that guy and point out the faults here. But the Boston Bruins, in terms of the faceoffs, have been bad. It's been bad over the last two games. The Bruins, in their win over the New Jersey Devils on Saturday night, 5-2, they only won a mere 27.5% of their faceoffs. And then, oh, by the way, in their win against the Detroit Red Wings on New Year's Eve, the percentage went up also slightly, where they won 32.1% of the faceoffs in their win against the Detroit Red Wings. And that is a concern moving forward because obviously we knew that Bergeron, Mr. Selke, best faceoff man in the league, definitely played a huge part in terms of the Bruins' success from the faceoff circle. But what you also are seeing is a team that is not very good with the faceoffs, especially in the last couple of games where it's been particularly noticeable. So I wonder what Jim Montgomery will do moving forward to address the faceoff issues that the Bruins have had in the last couple of games. I'm curious to see what Jim Montgomery will do in terms of, like addressing this issue, especially given that the Bruins are on the road right now. They face the Columbus Blue Jackets in their next game, and I'm curious to see whether if there will be any sort of improvement in terms of the faceoff circle, and faceoff wins, and so forth. And that remains to be seen. As far as the Celtics is concerned, um, they continue to keep things rolling after having beat the San Antonio Spurs 134-101 on New Year's Eve. I mean, this team continues to find a way to win games, even when they're missing a starter or two. In which that this was a game. Speaking of missing a couple of starters out, I thought that watching Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis was the kind of lineup that you needed in order to beat San Antonio, especially the way that San Antonio like defended in this game. I really like seeing like Porzingis and Al Horford out there, to a double big, in which that obviously both players can shoot it from long distance, but also I think that Porzingis, he's got a really good mid-range game, and you saw little bits and pieces of that in the Celtics win over the Spurs on New Year's Eve. And I also want to point out um, that Luke Cornett, I mean, considering that he had 20 points against the Toronto Raptors, I thought he was absolutely like terrific, especially coming off the bench. I thought that he did pretty well. Excuse me, on in the limited time that he had, only playing a grand total of 9 minutes in that game against the Spurs. And I thought that Luke Cornett, he's showing more and more like why he's such an important piece of the Celtics team, especially at the bench. And you gotta really like what you see in terms of what the Celtics are doing, especially when they have a starter or two like that not play or not start a game, as that was the case with Drew Holiday. He did not play in a game against San Antonio. He had the elbow injury, but you saw the guy step in and play really well, especially offensively, like chip in. And I thought that that's something that is going to continue to serve the Celtics very well, as they currently sit at 26-6, best record in the NBA. And it's the reason why this team is looked upon as one of the favorites to win the NBA title this season. But obviously, the real test will come once you get to the playoffs. And with that being said, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Believe in Hub of Champions podcast with your host, Shukri Wright. I look forward to talking to you again next episode. Take care, everybody, and be safe. Happy New Year.